Whilomville Stories Part 10, The Trial, Execution and Burial of Homer Phelps. Stephen Crane, Short Stories. From time to time, an unwearied pine bough let fall to the earth its load of melting snow, and the branch swung back, glistening in the faint, wintry sunlight. Down the gulch a brook clattered amid its ice with the sound of perpetual breaking glass. All the forest looked drenched and forlorn. The skyline was a ragged enclosure of grey cliffs and hemlocks and pines. If one had been miraculously set down in this gulch, one could have imagined easily that the nearest human habitation was hundreds of miles away, if it were not for an old, half-discernible road that led toward the brook. "Halt! Who's there?" This low and gruff cry suddenly dispelled the stillness which lay upon the lonely gulch, but the hush which followed it seemed even more profound. The hush endured for some seconds, and then the voice of the challenger was again raised, this time with a distinctly querulous note in it. "Halt! Who's there? Why don't you answer when I holler? Don't you know you're likely to get shot?" A second voice answered, "Oh, you knew who I was, and easy enough." "That don't make no difference." One of the Margate twins stepped from a thicket and confronted Homer Phelps on the old wood road. The majestic scowl of official wrath was upon the brow of Reeves Margate. A long stick was held in the hollow of his arm, as one would hold a rifle, and he strode grimly to the other boy. "That don't make no difference. You've got to answer when I holler, anyhow. Willie says so." At the mention of the dread chieftain's name, the Phelps boy daunted a trifle, but he still sulkily murmured, "Well, you knew it was me." He started on his way through the snow, but the twins sturdily blocked the path. "You can't pass, lessen you give the countersign." "Huh?" said the Phelps boy. "Countersign?" "Yes, countersign," sneered the twin, strong in his sense of virtue. But the Phelps boy became very angry. Can't I, hey? Can't I, hey? I'll show you whether I can or not. I'll show you, Reeves Margate." There was a short scuffle, and then arose the anguished clamour of the sentry. "Hey, fellas, here's a man trying to run past the guard. Hey, fellas, hey." There was a great noise in the adjacent underbrush. The voice of Willie could be heard exhorting his followers to charge swiftly and bravely. Then they appeared: Willie, Dowsel, Jimmy Trescott, another Margate twin, and Dan Earl. The chieftain's face was dark with wrath. "What's the matter? Can't you play it right? Ain't you got any sense?" he asked the Phelps boy. The sentry was yelling out his grievance. "Now he came along and I hollered at him, and he didn't pay no attention, and when I asked him countersign he wouldn't say nothing. That ain't no way." "Can't you play it right?" asked the chief again, with gloomy scorn. "He knew it was me, easy enough," said the Phelps boy. "That ain't got nothing to do with it," cried the chief furiously. That ain't got nothing to do with it. If you're gonna play, you got to play it right. It ain't no fun if you go spoiling the whole thing this way. Can't you play it right?" "I forgot the countersign," lied the culprit weakly. Whereupon the remainder of the band yelled out with one triumphant voice, "War to the knife! War to the knife! I remember it, Willie, don't I, Willie?" The leader was puzzled. Evidently he was trying to develop his mind a plan for dealing correctly with this unusual incident. He felt no doubt that he must proceed according to the books. But unfortunately the books did not cover the point precisely. However, he finally said to Homer Phelps, "You are under arrest." Then, with a stentorian voice, he shouted, "Seize him!" His loyal followers looked startled for a brief moment, but directly they began to move upon the Phelps boy. The latter clearly did not intend to be seized. He backed away, expostulating wildly. He even seemed somewhat frightened. "No, no, don't you touch me. I tell you, don't you dare touch me." The others did not seem anxious to engage. They moved slowly, watching the desperate light in his eyes. The chieftain stood with folded arms, his face growing darker and darker with impatience, At length he burst out, "Oh, seize him, I tell you! Why don't you seize him? Grab him by the leg! Danny, hurry up, all of you! Seize him! I keep us sane!" Thus adjured, the Margate twins and Dan Earl made another pained effort, while Jimmy Trescott manoeuvred to cut off a retreat, but, to tell the truth, there was a boyish law which held them back from laying hands of violence upon little Phelps under these conditions. Perhaps it was because they were only playing, whereas he was now undeniably serious. At any rate, they looked very sick of their occupation. "Don't you dare, don't," snarled the Phelps boy, facing first one and then the other. He was almost in tears. "Don't you dare touch me." The chieftain was now hopping with exasperation. "Oh, seize him, can't you? You're no good at all." Then he loosed his wrath upon the Phelps boy. "Stand still, Homer. You can't, You've got to be seized, you know. That ain't the way. It ain't any fun if you keep a dodging that way. Stand still, can't you? You've got to be seized." "I don't want to be seized," retorted the Phelps boy, obstinate and bitter. "But you've got to be seized," yelled the maddened chief. "Don't you see? That's the way to play it." The Phelps boy answered promptly, "But I don't want to play that way." "But that's the right way to play it. Don't you see? You've got to play it the right way. You've got to be seized, and then we'll hold a trial on you, and all sorts of things." But this prospect held no illusions for the Phelps boy. He continued doggedly to repeat, "I don't want to play that way." Of course, in the end, the chief stooped to beg and beseech this unreasonable lad. "Oh, come on, Homer, don't be so mean. You're spoiling everything. We won't hurt you any, not the tiniest bit. It's just all playing. What's the matter with you?" The different tone of the leader made an immediate impression upon the other. He showed some signs of beginning of weakness. "Well," he asked, "what you gonna do?" Why, first we're gonna put you in a dungeon or tie you to a stake or something like that. Just pretend, added the chief hurriedly. "And then we'll hold a trial, awful solemn, but there won't be anything what'll hurt you, not a thing." And so the game was readjusted. The Phelps boy was marched off between Dan Earl and Margate twin. The party proceeded to their camp, which was hidden some 100 feet back in the thickets. There was a miserable little hut with a pine bark roof, which so frankly and constantly leaked that existence in the open air was always preferable. At present it was noisily dripping melted snow into the black mouldy interior. In front of this hut a feeble fire was flickering through its unhappy career. Underfoot the watery snow was of the colour of lead. The party having arrived at the camp, the chief leaned against a tree and, balancing on one foot, drew off a rubber boot. From this boot he emptied about a quart of snow. He squeezed his stocking, which had a hole from which protruded a lobster-red toe. He resumed his boot. "Bring up the prisoner," he said. They did it. "Guilty or not guilty?" he asked. "Huh?" said the Phelps boy.